What was I thinking? So, yeah, the barbecue and the coleslaw. So it's funny. My travel partner and I talked about it. Um, it was coleslaw like we would have in Eastern North Carolina. So it was simple. It knew to be it was a supporting player. It was not the star. Wow. It was cabbage. It was a little bit of carrots for some color. It was mayonnaise and vinegar because you got to have vinegar to go with that vinegary barbecue. So that coleslaw was on the money, doing its job as a secondary player.
So you're like a chef. You've been bringing out recipes and everything. I'm like, what? I just want to make sure it tastes good. And I got like 12 different spices in it. But that's cool, bro. That's nice. So you know how to make it.
What?
Coleslaw. You sound like I can tell the way you broke down the recipe. I'm like, we need a recipe, need some coleslaw. We know who to reach out to. Yeah, that's cool. So I'm glad you enjoyed the Black People. You said you enjoyed it.
I did.
Yeah, I'm glad you did, and I'm assuming you're going back in 2 years.
If I live and nothing happen, as our folks say.
So, remember, y'all want to go? It's every 2 years. So it just happened this year. So we'll be back in 2028. So remember that. We're gonna shift gears a little bit. Let's see. We're gonna get into it because actually, this is one of the reasons I actually was going to do the interview earlier because we had to work some things up. But of course, everyone knows. I think that this year America turned 250. So what does that mean for you? Because you've been a historian and bold. I have to put a hat on historian. He is. So what that mean for you? Like when it's 250, like what
It's been a lot because well, it's mixed. It's really hard to describe. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of this country. Okay. I love this country because I have every right to love it because I built it. So I'm not going to let anybody else say that they did. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to let anybody try to take away what I did. Mm-hmm. And just like I love my family, who can be crazy, because we're normal, because everybody crazy. But that doesn't stop you from loving somebody, right? We all have our moments, we all have our issues, but a group of people is supposed to support each other. That's why you're a group. Mm-hmm. That's the way we treat our families, and that's the way I feel about my church, and that's the way I feel about my country. So my country is far from perfect, particularly now. But the important part of that sentence in the important word in that sentence in there is mine. Mm-hmm. It's mine. It's not where I wanted to be. It's crazy at the moment, but it's still mine. And I'm not going to step away from that. So I got this great love for the country. Now I live in D.C. I ran out of there 4th of July. I couldn't be there. Went in Underground Railroad to Maryland and hid out where I couldn't hear or see the fireworks. Because if I stayed in my house, I could see them out the front window, and I could hear them. And I couldn't be in that space. As much as I love my country, I couldn't be in that space. So I Underground Railroaded out of there and went and hid out in Maryland, close to Baltimore.
I've never heard of it. He said the Underground Railroad.
I did.
I'm going to a T-shirt that says, I don't want to be here right now.
I dressed my car up like a Quaker, and I just...
Why? If you can explain.
I love my country. So, I watch a lot of videos, podcasts just like yours, right? And I watch one I watch several that are react videos out of UK.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're always and they're looking back at the United States, right? And this one set of react videos that I like watching, they continually say, these Americans are always waving their flags. We don't have these flags. In England, we don't have flags on windows and flags in front of people's houses we don't do flags, but Americans got flags everywhere. But then they also said, oh, but here when you see a flag, it means something. Mm-hmm. And that was a pregnant way they said it means something. It was this is mine and ain't nobody else's.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they meant in UK. And sometimes our displays of patriotism feel the same way. And so Although I'm a Washingtonian and I love DC and I live literally 20 blocks north of the Capitol, I'm right there. I couldn't be there for a display of patriotism that felt different than my understanding of patriotism.
Good answer. I had to like let it sink in. I was like, I just need a moment. Because it's one of those things when you hear a comment like that, you can't just like go run to the next question. It's just like one of those things where it makes you think. Like everyone that's watching, they can probably relate to that. Some on the bottom, they like, cause it's supposed to be one way, and it looks another way. Like, wait a minute, I thought, you know what? Just take a moment. So, but okay, I had a speed bump, so but that's understandable. So, as you took a break, right? How long break did you take?
I stayed there overnight, so I left before the fireworks started, and the planes flying overhead. That's very, low planes flying over your house. That's not a great feeling. Particularly again when you feel it's a power display over your house. So I left midday, I think, and then I didn't have any plans. I went, I found a restaurant, I ate, I came back to the hotel, I played on my laptop, I got a good night's sleep, I woke up the next morning, and I leisurely drove back to my house after it was all over.
You say, all the boom boom, nah, I'm cool.
Yep.
You left before it started, came back afterwards. Came back in the aftermath, so I understand. 250, yeah, what can we start? So, when it came to, because I know you said you did some workshops or seminars, I guess is what it is. So, did you start preparing for it the year before? Or did you kind of was like, all right, let me start this year? That makes any sense.
It does. So the answer is God. There's your answer right there. Because I didn't plan any of this. I did not plan any of this. I mean, I have a relationship with Pender County Public Library. Yay, Pender County Public Library. So, I've done presentations down there about our family and about Pender County. And I did a presentation on our Jacobs ancestors who fought in the Revolutionary War out of Pender County as free men of color, which you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with at this point because that was just on PBS. Zachariah Jacobs' story was just on PBS last month, as well as the previous month, he got his historical marker put up in Wilmington. So Zachariah Jacobs, historical marker, free man of color, fought the revolution, and it was on the PBS, North Carolina PBS station show called Homegrown. I think it's called Homegrown. And that was one of the episodes highlighting our he wasn't our ancestor. His brother, Primus Jacobs, was our ancestor. So he's our uncle. Both of them were patriots. But our ancestor in Revolutionary War pension record said, yeah, I fought. I was not in a whole lot of battles. I was in a skirmish. And I got a wife, and she's about 55. And I got children in there, I think 22, 20, and 16, I think he said. And I'm a cooper, makes barrels. But my shoulder's broken, so I can't work, so I need my pension. That's very boring. And he doesn't name any of his children, thanks, Granddad, or his wife. Zachariah Jacobs was like, look, I was in the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, which is a major battle. I was wounded in the leg. The Quakers nursed me to health. I was walking back from Greensboro back to Wilmington, and I got captured. And his story is like, pow, 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 pow. It's movie quality. So that's why Uncle Zachariah gets all the play, and our ancestors like, But anyway, my point is, I told that story in Pender County. Me and my cousins, we worked together, and they put it on their YouTube channel. And the next thing I know, North Carolina Genealogist Society is saying, would you do this in Raleigh at our conference? They were having a 250 conference. I think that was in 2024. And I said, okay. So off we go. And it's me and my three cousins. So it's myself, it's our cousin Luke Alexander, and our cousin Kevin Graham, who's a direct descendant of Zachariah Jacobs. So the three of us do this particular shtick. And so once we got picked up by NCGS, every time we do it, other people come to us and say, "Oh, you got to do it for us. You got to do it for us." So this whole cottage industry built itself around us. We've been in Columbia, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina, Fayetteville-ish, North Carolina, Halifax, Eastern Shore, because that was really important to us. Because the Jacobs came from Eastern Shore in the 1600s. So for Juneteenth, we spoke on Eastern Shore. And we were able to stand on Eastern Shore where our people were enslaved, the Jacobs were enslaved in the 1600s, and say, but we didn't stay slaves. We were free here in the 1700s, and now let's look all over North Carolina and South Carolina where we were fighting as free men because we came from this spot right here. And we blew them away. So yeah, everywhere we go, we get more work because it's a story that is resonating with people. And I particularly enjoy my part because Kevin is the last leg. He tells Zachariah's story. Luke is the middle. So wherever we are, like South Carolina or Halifax, he tailors his presentation to that particular location so that he can talk to those people. And here's the South Carolina Patriots. And here's the people that are from Halifax. So he does that. I do the setup because we knew that if we just showed up and said, oh, look, there's hundreds of men of color that fought in the Revolutionary War out of Southeast North Carolina, rational people would be like, and who are you? How do you know that? And that's not the DAR. I don't have all those people. How did you come up with more names than the DAR? So I explained how these men got to be free, what free color people of color mean, how we find them because they were paying double taxes, and so how you have to know the people because they weren't labeled as men of color. You got to know the names to look for, and then you got to verify that they're of color by looking at their tax records and stuff. And so I'm teaching people that aren't familiar with the culture. Brown people aren't familiar with the culture, and white people aren't familiar with the culture. And I'm really proud about that.
Wow. Gotta take that in. So it's like y'all on the Olympics, y'all doing the relay race.
Yeah.
Passing the baton.
Starting off. I set them up. Here's why you need to listen to us. We know what we're talking about. Luke is like, here's how it relates to where you're standing right now. And Kevin is like, let me tell you the Zachariah Jacobs story. He's the man.
That is pretty cool. So when you do these different seminars or workshops, do you have a lot of people afterwards? I don't know how it works. Do you have like Q&A or do you have a lot of questions?
Yeah. Usually people say to us, I had no idea people of color paid double taxes. Because we did. We paid double taxes up until the Civil War. And I think that's so important because the storyline can often be in America that brown people have taken, that you're using up America. Well, actually, if you were brown in America prior to the Civil War, let's just stay right there for a minute because you either paid double taxes because you were free, or you paid 100% taxes because you were enslaved. Like that's called zero take-home pay. So that would be 100% taxes. So I love getting that perspective out there. And I also love, we have spoken, most of the audiences that we speak to are majority white. One particular one I remember was 100% white. We sat in this full auditorium, we're sitting on the stage and I'm looking at my cousins and I'm like, you do realize we're the only brown people in this room, right? And at the end of that one, people came up to me and said, thank you for your story. Thank you. I had no idea people of color pay double taxes. So, Americans, because it's my country and I love it, are willing to listen if you bring them data and you bring it without poking them in the eye.
Right. Yeah.
You can give somebody a data fact without saying, look what you did. Nobody wants that.
Walk away. Yeah. So, I had a question. You was talking, I'm like, dang, I can hear. Oh, okay, I know what it was. So, for those that don't know, because probably a lot of people might not know, the whole double tax thing. Can you explain that? Because some people are like, double tax, what does that mean? Some people like,
So not property tax, The titleable tax, which is a poll tax. I hesitate to use the word poll tax because that had a whole different meaning after the Civil War, because then it was a poll tax used to prevent brown people from voting. But basically, it was kind of like a tax, like everybody was taxed to raise money for the government, right? So if you were a white couple, let's say the tax was $10. If you were a white couple, you paid $10 because the man was taxed. If you're a couple of color, you paid $20 because the man was taxed and the woman was taxed. Women of color were taxed. So that's why I say people were double taxed. And that's very important because, and it was true, Virginia led it. I'm a Virginian, born and raised. So we led the good stuff and the bad stuff. So here's some bad stuff we led, right? I think we were the first ones to do that. And then it went across the South. I don't know about the North that much, so don't. I can't speak to that. But it's a thing in the South because there's records of men who married, as people. A lot of our relatives lightened over time and whitened over time and passed into white identity or indigenous identity over time, right? So there's records of our ancestors going to North Carolina General Assembly saying, I think my wife is white enough to not be taxed now, please. So it was definitely a thing, right? And there's records in North Carolina and South Carolina where men would petition for their wives to be relieved of the tax because they were trying to make the argument their wife is white enough not to pay the colored women's tax. And that's in Virginia in particular, this double taxing situation was important because Virginia was very assiduous on, you couldn't get land because Virginia was one of the first colonies, so the rich people had already taken all land. Right. So you're a free person of color, yay, but you can't get land to make a living. And even if you did get land, you couldn't keep your children because they were indentured, because free children of color were indentured to white families for their labor. So you didn't have your labor, you didn't have your land, and you had to pay double taxes, but you didn't have the money, and then you were sold if you didn't pay taxes. You were indentured. You were auctioned on the courthouse steps. So that's why so many of us Carolinians came from Virginia, because starting in the mid-1700s, that whole tax situation was pressing people because they were serfs. The only way to live in Virginia was to indenture yourself to white people who paid your taxes. So literally, you would be listed on the tax record as Tyson on Joe Blow's land. So it said he belongs to this land. Joe Blow is paying his taxes. And so all these people are listed as Tyson on Joe Blow's land, Jane on this land. So you were tied to the land. So the people got out of there and moved to North Carolina. That's why that's why our parents were in North Carolina.
Wow. It's like they had the rights.
Well, we've always had to move. Yeah. You always had to figure out a way. Even if it meant moving.
Something else. So, kind of going off there because I have another question about the cinema. We'll get that there. So, you said we're always moving. So my thing is, when they got to North Carolina, I'm not saying it stopped. I'm pretty sure we kept going. But what made them like, oh, you know what? We're good right here. What made them just stop in North Carolina? Because they could have kept going, I'm sure. Of course, they didn't want to go too far south, but what made them stop in places like North Carolina, South Carolina, and Tennessee? And just stay there.
Some of them did keep going, like you said. So our Jacobs started out on Eastern Shore enslaved in 1640s. Okay. Our ancestor was freed by 1700. He died on Eastern Shore in 1733. And that's when his family decided time to leave Virginia. So they start dropping down to North Carolina. But they're in Shawan County. You know where that is, Shawan?
So where's that?
It's it's in the Albemarle region, so it's further north than where it's still coast-ish, but further north than where we ended up. But he was down in Shawan, but then everybody dropped down into Fayetteville, Burgaw area around 1752, except one brother kept going to South Carolina. That's your point. Some did keep going. One Jacobs kept going. He was down in Richland County, which is Columbia. So you got two sets of Jacobs, two sets of free Jacobs, a smaller set because just one brother moved to South Carolina, but everybody else, a family of 10, stayed right there in the Penn area. That's why there's so many Jacobs in that area. Now, the reason North Carolina was attractive because Virginia was oppressive The rules I just told you about.
Mm-hmm.
South Carolina had Charleston.
Yeah.
North Carolina was the frontier in between. Like, you saw like the Wild Wild West movies.
Mm-hmm.
That was North Carolina when we moved there. And that's why we moved there, because there weren't all these firm laws that would oppress us as people of color. So we were able to get land. Mm-hmm. Nobody stopped us from getting land. You were able to make your way because it was a Wild Wild West.
Right.
That's why we stayed.
That's very interesting. Like when you listen to it now, it's like, I feel like a lot of people, and that's actually going to say what we go about to talk about next, but I feel like a lot of people, they really don't know. They're like, oh, okay, my family's been here and that's it, and somebody has to come and tell them. But reality check, no, your family didn't just stay here. They expanded out. That's why, gotta be careful who you marry. Or some people
or not.
Or not. We're going to get to that in a minute why he said. Because some people, if you don't want to be married to your relative, you might want to. Yeah, you get it. So going back to it, that's pretty funny. Going back to it, so man, I like this. This is why we family. So going back to the seminar and stuff. So when y'all would do, these seminars and workshops, did y'all ever have anybody? I feel like that. Did you have anybody to try to challenge y'all? Like y'all know your information, and they come and say, "Well, hold on, no, you're wrong. That's not what happened." Like they came full force and wouldn't care about anything.
Never.
I'm
always, I would, particularly in the beginning, I was always ready for it because, I'm a child of integration. I integrated schools, and so I spent my whole life dotting every I, crossing every T, ready for the worst case scenario. That's the way I was raised. But it never happened. It has never happened. I'm finding, like I said, people are, and I hit them right between the eyes. I literally have a whole set of slides that talk about how America had to create race, to create racism, to create race-based slavery. Yeah. I show the laws that did that. And so I'm not soft pedaling any of this, but again, I'm not poking people in the eyes. And I think people never feel like I'm personally attacking them or I'm saying you and your people are trash. Nobody's getting that from me. They're saying, here's some facts. Here's how we got here. And people are accepting the facts.
It is pretty gentle. I mean, with certain parts, I'm like, man, he's killing them, but I can see, when you come, they don't really sense you as a threat.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
Again, child of integration, you have to know how not to be a threat.
So, that's cool. So, which I didn't ask, so I'm going to say this. So, of course, again, for those who tuning in, we're talking about the section about America's Turn 2050. So, when you go out here and do the workshops, I already broke it down how you place it. You start up, you got your middle man, you got the last leg. So, for those, all right. I had a brain freeze for a second. Sorry. So basically, my question is, so the people you talk about, the key people, like how do you? I think your answer shaped it. I guess because we know that the biggest part of it, they were a big reason why American history is the way it is. So I guess thank you. So when it came to them, did they some of the people that was in the war and stuff like that, were they for just one side or other, or they like double agents?
Ooh, that's a very good question.
Yeah, that's why I had to try to find it. But were they playing both sides of the team? Were they like in connection with the president? Like, you're president's special agent. Nobody else knows about him. Outside of mine,
Yeah, I have a whole sub presentation. So what I talked about was a presentation I do with my cousins, but then I have other ones that I do maybe solo. Like I did one at my church about men of color who fought, those who fought for the Patriot side and those that fought with the English, those that were enslaved and those that were free. So I got 4 quadrants. And so I had men in each of those quadrants. And their commonality was their relationship to George Washington. Exactly what you just said, right? Some of them were men that George Washington had enslaved, that ran away and fought. Some of them were our ancestors, which I consider a secondary relationship to George Washington because our Jacob's ancestor was enslaved by John Custis II.
Mm-hmm.
And so that same Custis line is George Washington's family. I mean, his grandchildren were Custises, right? And so our ancestors plugged in one of my spaces in the quadrant. Generally, as we look at the people that fought in North Carolina and South Carolina and Virginia, for the most part, free men of color fought with the Patriots. Because think about it. What was the Patriots saying? No taxation without representation. And what I tell when I do a presentation, of course we were on to that. You were already charging us double taxes. If our white neighbors said, this is taxation without representation, the British taxes are too high, we were like, yes, because mine is twice yours. Let's go. Who we fight? Yeah. So for the most part, men of color, free men of color, fought with their neighbors, and then too, many of them, these were their neighbors, particularly in North Carolina. These were their neighbors. We had traded with them. We had, in many instances, had married with them for generations. So we were in the same community. We fought with them. Enslaved men, because again, we always have to move and find a way through. Enslaved men wisely fought with the British. Because the British said, if you fight with me, I will free you. And the enslaved men were like, bet, let's go. Yeah. And so, and that's a fascinating story that many, people don't know. That's how we have the country of Sierra Leone. Because the British, in this particular time period, were not good at fighting because they lost. But what they were good at is keeping a particular promise. Because when they lost, George Washington was like, okay, that's a wrap. You surrendered, you lost, give back those Negroes. And they were like, we may have lost, but we're not giving back the Negroes. We told them we free and we're not giving them back. And they didn't. They took them to Nova Scotia. Negroes in cold, that was not a good thing. They took them to Nova Scotia. A few of them stayed. But then that's when they created the country of Sierra Leone. They took those people back to Sierra Leone. And one of the founders, y'all can Google this, and I'm going to forget his name. But one of the founders of Sierra Leone is a man from Wilmington, North Carolina, who was enslaved in Wilmington, who escaped to the British, who fought with the British, who went to Nova Scotia, and then to Sierra Leone, and is considered the founder of Sierra Leone from our neck of the woods.
Wow. What? I learned something new today. What? Is he related or just from our neck of the woods?
He's not related, but he's from our neck of the woods. He literally, there was a British warship posted outside of Wilmington, and slaves were getting on that ship. And he was one of them, volunteering, right? He was one of them, and he literally is a founder of Sierra Leone. And I'm going to think of his name in a minute, hopefully.
Okay. So, I'm going to ask this question. We'll just go with it. So, around this time, when was the Indian War?
Which?
Oh, okay. There we go. So, that's a good question. Which one? So, pretty sure they had a hand on that with the Indian War. Actually, so I told you about it. They had a thing about the Buffalo Soldiers and fighting and stuff. So, I'm going to just question this way. So, basically, all right, so when they was actually a big part of the Indian War, when I was told. Like, they were front line in some of those places. But I guess my question is, with the whole Indian War thing, was it a situation where I guess was that one of the first ways, not first ways, one of the major ways as you say, brown people were interacting with the natives, like they started, connecting with them. If that makes any sense. I don't know, I feel like, because, I've seen movies where people go to war, and these people that they supposed to be fighting, they find themselves connecting with them on something else.
So we're vibing. We're doing a good job here because that's going to circle me back to Winston Salem Theater Festival. Right? There was, it took a lot for, the English to steal this land from the indigenous people. It took generations. In our part of North Carolina, our cousins would say that, would want to make the point that even though the names disappeared, and I mean the names of the original people, like the Soiree and the PD and the names that you don't hear anymore, the Waxaw, the names that you don't hear anymore except on car dealerships and rivers, but aren't attached to people anymore. In our part of North Carolina, you didn't hear those names. Like by the time we got there, by the time we got there in the 1750s, you did not hear the original tribal names anymore because the English had already diminished them.
Yeah.
Now, were there still some DNA around there and people around there? Yes, but there was not a set of people that had to be reckoned with that needed a name, other than Tuscarora, because they still had their reservation in Bertie County.